Is your bed big enough for two?
All right, back to the
The
party.
question landed in Ethan
Great to
Brooks'
see
kitchen
you.
on a Sunday morning in December. 9-year-old Liam perched on the counter, swinging his legs, watching his father scramble eggs that would
To us.
inevitably
To
turn out
us.
too dry. Ethan's hand
I've missed
froze
this.
mid-stir, the spatula hovering over the pan, while something in his chest contracted hard enough to hurt. 3 years. 3 years since Caroline died, and the king-size bed upstairs still pressed against the wall where she'd needed it for support those final months. 3 years of sleeping on the right side, leaving the left untouched, as if the empty space could somehow contain her absence without letting it spread to the rest of the house. Liam tilted his head, waiting for an answer with the patient curiosity that made him seem older than 9 going on 10. The glow-in-the-dark stars on his bedroom ceiling, 43 constellations he could name by heart, had been Caroline's project, stuck up there during a marathon bedtime negotiation 4 years ago, when the world still made sense. It's big enough. The words formed in Ethan's mind, but refused to reach his mouth because he didn't know if he believed them, didn't know if hearts had the same capacity as mattresses, didn't know if wanting something new meant erasing something old. Breakfast burned while Ethan stood there calculating impossible equations, and Liam mercifully let the question dissolve into chatter about NASA's Mars rover and whether astronauts ever got homesick in space. 47 minutes. That's how long Ethan had been holding the champagne glass at Morrison and Fletcher's annual winter gala, the crystal stem catching light from chandeliers that probably cost more than his yearly salary. The Fairmont Copley Plaza's ballroom sparkled with the kind of old Boston money that made structural engineers from suburban neighborhoods feel like they'd wandered onto the wrong movie set. His phone showed 9:30. Liam would be asleep by now. Mrs. Margaret Miller next door ran a tight ship when it came to bedtimes, and his son knew better than to test a woman who'd raised 3 boys of her own before her husband's heart gave out 5 years back. Still, Ethan checked the screen for the 4th time in 12 minutes. No emergencies, no escape routes. The blue-striped tie he'd found at Macy's clearance rack 2 years ago didn't quite match his department store suit, but it was good enough. Everything about Ethan Brooks these days operated on the principle of good enough father, good enough engineer, good enough at pretending he wasn't still sleeping on one side of a bed meant for 2. You look like you're planning an escape route. The voice came from his left, warm with amusement that sounded genuine rather than polite. Ethan turned to find Sophia Kane standing close enough that her perfume, something subtle and expensive, cut through the competing scents of expensive cologne and catered hors d'oeuvres. The deep emerald gown transformed Morrison and Fletcher's notoriously severe director of engineering operations into someone he barely recognized. Sophia Kane, who'd once made a senior architect cry during a project review, who wore exclusively gray and navy to the office, hair pulled back in a bun so tight it looked painful, who had a reputation for leaving meetings early because she didn't have time for incompetence. Tonight she looked almost human. "No, I was just—" The champagne nearly slipped from Ethan's grip as he fumbled for words that wouldn't sound pathetic. "Relax, Ethan. I'm not timing your bathroom breaks tonight." She smiled, and it was real, something that didn't quite reach her eyes but came closer than anything he'd seen in 18 months of quarterly reviews and project status meetings. "We're off the clock. You came alone." Sophia accepted a fresh champagne flute from a passing waiter, dismissing Ethan's half-empty glass with a practiced glance that suggested she'd cataloged it somewhere between the 2nd and 3rd time he'd checked his phone. No date. "My son's 9. Couldn't find a babysitter who'd stay past 10 on a Saturday." The excuse rolled out automatic, polished smooth from 3 years of using it. And his mother. The question dropped like a stone into still water. Most people at Morrison and Fletcher knew office gossip being what it was, but Sophia had only joined the company 18 months ago, long after the flowers stopped arriving, after HR stopped checking in with that careful concern that made Ethan want to crawl out of his own skin. She passed away 3 years ago. Ovarian cancer, stage 4, by the time they caught it at Mass General. Ethan waited for the usual choreography, the head tilt, the soft murmur of sympathy, the quick pivot to safer conversational territory. Instead, Sophia took a long sip of champagne and stared out at the ballroom, where their colleagues swayed to a string quartet's rendition of something classical that all sounded the same to Ethan's untrained ear. "My father died when I was 12. She said it quietly, almost conversationally, as if commenting on the weather rather than excavating old wounds. Heart attack. Dropped dead in the middle of a board meeting on State Street. Everyone said he didn't suffer like that was supposed to make it better, like the speed of it somehow made him less gone. In 18 months of working under Sophia Kane's supervision, Ethan had never heard her say anything remotely personal. She existed in PowerPoint presentations and Excel spreadsheets in sharp questions that exposed sloppy thinking and sharper observations that fixed problems before they metastasized. The woman standing beside him now, wine glass trembling slightly in her hand, eyes fixed on the middle distance, bore only passing resemblance to the person who'd signed off on his last 3 project approvals. "I'm sorry." The words felt inadequate but genuine. "Don't be." It was 26 years ago. Sophia turned to face him fully, and Ethan was struck by how different she looked without the armor of fluorescent office lighting and quarterly revenue pressure. Softer. Tired in a way she never let show at work. "But you never really stop missing them, do you? The people who leave holes?" "No. You just get better at walking around the holes without falling in." Sophia's laugh was quiet and unexpected, a sound that seemed to surprise her as much as it did him. "That's the most honest thing anyone said to me all night. Do you know how many people have asked me about Q4 projections at a Christmas party? 7. I counted." She shook her head, and some of the severity crept back into her expression, the mask settling into familiar lines. "They see the title and forget there's a person underneath. Or maybe they just don't care." Ethan studied her, really looked perhaps for the first time since she'd joined Morrison and Fletcher. Mid-30s, he guessed, though the sharp cheekbones made her look stern in poor lighting. Eyes that shifted between green and hazel depending on the angle. No wedding ring, no mention of a husband or boyfriend in any of the office gossip that occasionally drifted to his corner of the engineering floor. "You hide it well." "Hide what?" "That you're lonely." The words escaped before Ethan could stop them, honest in a way that would have been wildly inappropriate 47 minutes ago, when they were still boss and employee, still operating within the careful boundaries that kept professional life from bleeding into whatever else existed beyond office walls. But something about the champagne, the one sip he'd finally taken, and the late hour and the string quartet playing something slow and melancholic had stripped away his usual filters. Sophia's expression shifted. Not anger exactly, more like recognition, like he'd named something she'd been carrying in silence for so long she'd forgotten it had a weight. "I could say the same about you." Her voice stayed soft, but the observation landed with precision. "I'm not lonely. I have Liam work. Mrs. Maggie bakes us cookies every Sunday. I'm surviving." Sophia finished the sentence for him. "Which isn't the same as living. Trust me, I wrote the manual." Ethan wanted to argue, wanted to explain that survival was enough, that asking for more felt greedy when Liam had already lost so much. But Sophia was watching him with those 2 knowing eyes, and the ballroom suddenly felt too small, too warm, too full of people who'd never understand what it meant to wake at 3 in the morning, reaching for someone who wasn't there. "Can I ask you something?" "Sure. When's the last time you did something just because you wanted to?" Sophia's question hung in the air between them, sharp and weighted. Not because Liam needed it or work required it, or your dead wife would have approved. Just because you, Ethan Brooks, not Ethan the father or Ethan the engineer, actually wanted it. The question hit harder than it should have. Ethan opened his mouth to answer and found he couldn't, because the truth was he didn't remember. The last 3 years had been a blur of parent-teacher conferences and project deadlines and folding tiny socks while pretending he didn't sometimes forget what color Caroline's eyes had been, whether they were blue or gray or somewhere in between. "I don't know." The admission tasted like defeat. "Me neither." Sophia drained her champagne and set the empty glass on a nearby table with more force than necessary. "I work 70 hours a week. I have a penthouse apartment in Back Bay with a view of the harbor that I barely see because I'm never home before dark. I own 14 identical gray suits because making decisions about clothing feels like a waste of cognitive resources." She laughed, but it sounded hollow, brittle at the edges. "My therapist in Cambridge says I'm conflict avoidant in my personal life while being aggressively confrontational in professional settings, which is apparently a fancy way of saying I'm a coward who hides behind Excel spreadsheets." "You're not a coward. You're careful. There's a difference." "Is there?" "Because from where I'm standing, careful just looks like scared with better packaging." The string quartet shifted into something slower, and couples drifted onto the dance floor in pairs. Colleagues who'd probably spent the last hour discussing market forecasts and resource allocation now swaying together like they'd forgotten the world existed beyond the circle of each other's arms. "My wife loved to dance." Ethan heard himself say it, the words emerging unbidden. "Caroline, she'd drag me to weddings, company parties, anywhere with a live band. I hated it at first, 2 left feet, terrible rhythm. But she'd laugh every time I stepped on her toes, especially when we'd sway to those old jazz standards or Sinatra, the kind of music her parents used to play. And eventually I stopped caring about looking stupid because making her happy was better than looking competent." "What changed?" "She got sick, and then dancing didn't seem important anymore. Except now Liam asks why we never dance at home, and I can't explain that the last time I slow danced with someone she weighed 90 pounds and could barely stand, and I held her in our living room at 2 in the morning while she cried because she knew she was running out of time. The radio was playing The Way You Look Tonight, our wedding song. The words came out raw, unfiltered, the kind of truth Ethan hadn't shared with anyone. Not Mrs. Maggie, not the grief counselor Mass General had recommended, certainly not Liam, who'd been 5 and understood only that Mommy was sick and then Mommy was gone. Sophia was quiet for a long moment, champagne flute forgotten in her hand. Then she did something that surprised them both. She held out her hand. "Dance with me." "What?" "You heard me. Dance. Here now." "Sophia." "Don't think. Just do something because you want to for once in the last 3 years." Her eyes challenged him, but there was something else there too, a vulnerability that matched his own. A recognition that they were both standing at the edge of the same cliff, wondering if jumping would feel like flying or falling. Ethan took her hand. The string quartet was playing Autumn Leaves, the jazz standard, not the classical piece which seemed fitting for 2 people who'd spent so long pretending to be someone they weren't. It didn't matter what song filled the space between them. What mattered was the way Sophia's hand fit in his warm and steady, despite the tremor he could feel in her fingers. The way she moved closer, close enough that he could see the faint lines at the corners of her eyes, evidence of smiles she rarely showed at work. They swayed more than danced, Ethan rusty from 3 years of nothing, and Sophia admitting she'd learned ballroom basics at mandatory dance lessons in Brookline her mother had insisted on when she was 14 and hated every second. But somehow they found a rhythm, small steps in a small circle, while the rest of the party continued around them, oblivious or indifferent to 2 people trying to remember what it felt like to want something. "This is wildly inappropriate." Sophia murmured it after a minute, close enough that Ethan felt her breath against his collar. "I'm technically your supervisor. You said we're off the clock." HR would disagree. "Then it's a good thing I'm not planning to file a complaint. Unless you're a terrible dancer, then all bets are off." Sophia laughed. Actually laughed. The sound bright and unexpected, and Ethan felt something in his chest loosen that had been wound tight for 3 years. "I think we're both equally terrible. It balances out. Perfect mediocrity the Morrison and Fletcher way. Don't let the executives hear you say that. They'll put it on a motivational poster." They fell silent after that, just moving together, while the music swelled and other couples orbited around them, and Ethan became hyper-aware of the places where they touched her hand in his other hand resting carefully, respectfully at her waist, the slight pressure of her fingers on his shoulder. It had been so long since he'd been this close to another person, so long since touch meant something other than Liam crawling into bed after a nightmare, or Mrs. Maggie patting his arm sympathetically when she caught him staring at nothing on particularly hard days. "Liam's lucky to have you." Sophia said it quietly, like she was sharing a secret. What makes you say that? Because you're here at a party you clearly don't want to attend, wearing a tie that doesn't quite match your suit, counting the minutes until you can go home. But you came anyway because showing up matters, because being present matters, even when it's hard. That's the kind of thing good fathers do. Ethan felt something tight in his chest loosen slightly, some knot he hadn't realized he'd been carrying. Some days I'm not sure I'm doing it right. Raising him alone. Caroline was the good parent, patient, creative. She turned grocery shopping at Stop and Shop into an adventure, bedtime into story time. I just try not to mess up too badly. You think she didn't feel that way? Sophia's question came soft but firm. Every parent questions whether they're doing it right. The difference is you don't have anyone to share the doubt with. You carry it alone. Is that what your therapist says? That's what I say. The therapist charges $200 an hour to nod sympathetically while I figure it out myself. Ethan laughed despite himself, and Sophia's mouth quirked up at the corner, something genuine breaking through the careful control she usually maintained. Sounds like a good gig. The best scam in modern medicine. Then more seriously, do you ever talk to anyone about Caroline, about being a single parent, about any of it? I talked to Liam. He's 9. Mrs. Maggie then. She's your neighbor, not your therapist. I don't need therapy. I'm fine. The defensiveness came automatic, a reflex honed over 3 years of well-meaning questions and unwanted concern. Sophia pulled back slightly, just enough to meet his eyes, and Ethan saw something in her expression that looked uncomfortably like recognition. Ethan, you're at a Christmas party holding a champagne glass you didn't drink from for 47 minutes. Yes, I was counting, looking like you'd rather be anywhere else on earth. You're not fine. You're functional, which is impressive, honestly, but it's not the same thing. The observation should have stung. Instead, it felt like relief, like someone finally seeing what he'd been trying to hide, like maybe the careful construction he'd built around his life wasn't as solid as he'd pretended. I don't know how to be anything else. The admission came quiet, almost lost under the music. Fine was never the goal. The goal was making sure Liam didn't fall apart, making sure he still did his homework and brushed his teeth and remembered to laugh sometimes. If I fall apart too, then what? Who catches him? Maybe that's why you need to let someone catch you first. Sophia said it so quietly, Ethan almost missed it, and then the song ended, the quartet transitioning seamlessly into something up-tempo and forgettable, and around them couples separated or drew closer depending on their preferences. Ethan and Sophia stood still, hands still joined, neither quite ready to let go. I should go. Check on Liam. Pay Mrs. Maggie tomorrow's going to be brutal. He's got a science project due Monday, and we haven't even started the poster board. Photosynthesis or the solar system, I can't remember which. How did you? Sophia's eyebrows rose slightly. 3rd grade science curriculum is pretty standardized, and I may have volunteered at a children's science fair last year, company community outreach requirement at schools in Greater Boston. 16 poster boards about volcanoes and plant cells. I still have nightmares about construction paper. Ethan smiled despite the weight in his chest. Liam chose constellations. He's obsessed with stars. Caroline used to take him to the Harvard Observatory every month, and now he sleeps with glow-in-the-dark stars on his ceiling and talks about wanting to be a NASA astronaut. That's wonderful. It's expensive, Ethan corrected, then immediately regretted the honesty because it sounded mercenary petty, like he was measuring wonder in dollars. Real. Sophia finished for him. It sounded real, which is refreshing. She hesitated, and something shifted in her expression, uncertainty replacing the careful confidence she usually wore like armor. What if I helped? With what? The poster board, the science project. She released his hand, and Ethan felt the absence immediately, cold air rushing into the space where warmth had been. I'm not doing anything tomorrow, and I have an embarrassing amount of craft supplies left over from last year's volunteer work. Construction paper, markers, glitter, glue, the works. Ethan stared at her, trying to reconcile the woman who'd made grown men cry in project reviews with someone offering to spend Sunday afternoon helping a 9-year-old glue pictures of constellations onto poster board. You want to help my son with his science homework? Is that weird? That's weird? Forget I said anything. No, it's just... Ethan struggled to find the right words to articulate the question beneath the question. Why? Sophia's expression shifted again, and for a moment she looked lost, like she'd surprised herself as much as him. Because you looked at me tonight like I was a person instead of a title. Because I haven't done anything just because I wanted to in longer than I can remember. And because... She stopped, seemed to reconsider, then continued with the kind of raw honesty that made Ethan's chest ache. Because I'm tired of going home to an empty apartment and pretending that 70-hour work weeks are fulfilling. Maybe helping a kid glue pictures of constellations to poster board isn't going to change my life, but it sounds better than Sunday night Excel spreadsheets. Ethan knew he should say no, should maintain boundaries, should remember that Sophia was his boss. Technically still his boss for another few days based on the organizational restructuring that hadn't been announced yet, that mixing personal and professional was asking for trouble, that Liam didn't need the confusion of new people entering their carefully controlled world. He said yes anyway. Fair warning, Liam gets excited about projects. He'll probably talk your ear off about red giants and supernovas, and he might ask approximately 700 questions about why Pluto isn't a planet anymore. I can handle curious 9-year-olds. Sophia's smile was small but genuine. It's the incurious 40-year-olds I struggle with. They exchanged numbers, a transaction that felt far more significant than it should have, Ethan programming her contact as Sophia Work, and immediately feeling ridiculous about the qualifier. Sophia didn't add any designation, just his name in her phone alongside a time and address for tomorrow afternoon. Thank you. Ethan said it because he didn't know what else to say, because the weight of the evening was settling over him and he needed words to hold it in place. For this, for listening, for don't. Sophia interrupted gently, one hand touching his arm for just a moment before falling away. Don't make it more than it is. Two lonely people having an honest conversation at a terrible party, followed by a slightly less lonely Sunday afternoon helping a kid learn about space. That's all. But they both knew it was more than that, knew that something had shifted between them, something that couldn't be completely unshifted even if they tried. The carefully maintained distance between boss and employee, between two people who'd mastered the art of moving through the world alone, had cracked just enough to let light in. Ethan left the gala at 10:15, the earliest exit that wouldn't seem rude, and drove home through streets decorated with Christmas lights, past houses where families were probably settling in for the night, parents tucking in children who had two of everything that Liam had one of. He found Mrs. Maggie reading in his living room a mystery novel from the public library with a receipt from CVS marking her place. She looked up when he entered, studying him with the kind of attention that came from raising 3 boys and burying a husband and learning to read the silences between words. Liam went down at 8:30. No trouble. We watched that PBS documentary about Mars rovers, and he showed me his constellation chart. That boy's got a good brain. He gets it from his mother. Ethan said it automatically, the same response he'd given 100 times before. Mrs. Maggie stood gathering her book and reading glasses and patted Ethan's arm in that sympathetic way she had, the touch both comforting and somehow presumptuous, like she could see straight through whatever facade he'd constructed. Maybe, but he gets his heart from you. She paused at the door keys jingling in her hand. You look different tonight. Less tired. It's the same face, Mrs. Maggie. Same face, different eyes. Something happened. Ethan thought about denying it, about deflecting with the kind of pleasant nothing that had become his default, but Mrs. Maggie had known him for 5 years since her husband died, and she'd moved into the house next door since she'd started bringing casseroles every week after Caroline passed, since she'd watched Liam grow from a confused 5-year-old to a curious 9-year-old who asked questions about everything from black holes to why people had to die. I met someone, just talking, nothing serious. But she's coming over tomorrow to help with Liam's science project. Mrs. Maggie's eyebrows rose. Your boss is coming to your house to do arts and crafts. Former boss, actually, from work. Your boss is coming to your house to do arts and crafts. When you say it like that, it sounds weird. It is weird. But weird isn't always bad. Sometimes weird is just different, and different might be exactly what you need. After she left, Ethan checked on Liam, finding his son sprawled across his bed in the way only children could manage. Arms flung wide, mouth slightly open, the glow-in-the-dark stars on his ceiling casting faint green light across his face. The Red Sox blanket had tangled around his legs, and Ethan carefully extracted him, pulling the covers up to his chin without waking him. He stood there longer than necessary, watching Liam breathe, counting the rise and fall of his small chest, trying to memorize this moment before tomorrow came and changed everything. "Someone's coming to help with your project tomorrow." Ethan whispered it, even though Liam was deeply asleep, even though the words were more for himself than his son. "I think you'll like her. She's smart, kind of scary at work, but different outside of it. Like maybe she's been hiding the good parts because she thought she had to." Liam shifted in his sleep, mumbling something that sounded like, "Neptune has 14 moons," before settling again, and Ethan smiled despite the tightness in his throat. In his own bedroom, their bedroom still decorated exactly how Caroline had left it, Ethan stood at the window and looked out at the December sky. The stars were faint, this close to the city, washed out by streetlights and suburban glow, but he could make out Orion's belt if he looked hard enough, the 3 bright points Caroline had taught him to find on one of their early dates, back when the future stretched out infinite and unthreatening. She'd loved stars, had taken Liam to the Harvard Observatory once a month like it was church, a pilgrimage to wonder that Ethan had always been too busy to join. Too many projects, too many deadlines, too many reasons that seemed important at the time and felt hollow now. Excuses that had cost him memories he could never get back. "I danced tonight." He said it to the empty room, to the ghost of Caroline that sometimes felt more present than absent, to the 3 years of carefully maintained grief that had become almost comfortable in its familiarity. "With someone new. And I'm terrified that means I'm forgetting you. But I'm more terrified of Liam growing up watching me survive instead of live." The stars didn't answer. They never did. But somehow, standing there in the dark with New England wind rattling the windows, Ethan felt lighter than he had in 3 years. Like maybe Sophia had been right. Like maybe careful was just another word for scared, and maybe it was time to stop being so afraid of what came next. His phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number that resolved into Sophia's contact once he opened it. "Thank you for tonight. I haven't felt like a person instead of a position in longer than I care to admit. See you tomorrow." Ethan typed and deleted 3 responses before settling on something simple, something true. "Thank you for seeing me." Both versions. E. He set the phone on the nightstand and lay down on his side of the bed, the right side, the side he'd claimed 37 nights after Caroline died, because sleeping in the middle felt like giving up, felt like admitting she was really gone and not just away for a while. Tomorrow, Sophia Kane would come to his house, would meet his son, would probably realize that Ethan's life was a careful construction of managed chaos held together with post-it note reminders and frozen dinners from Stop and Shop, and the desperate hope that he was doing enough. Tomorrow things would change. He could feel it the way he'd felt the first rain of winter earlier that week. The air shifting before the storm arrived, something electric and inevitable building in the atmosphere. But tonight, Ethan Brooks, widower, father, engineer, survivor, closed his eyes and let himself imagine what it might feel like to stop surviving and start living to dance. Not because his dying wife needed the memory, but because he wanted to remember what joy felt like, to make room in his carefully controlled life for something unexpected, to believe that hearts didn't split when they expanded, that love didn't divide, that maybe, just maybe, broken people could build something beautiful from the pieces. Outside, the December wind of New England made the windows shudder in their frames. Inside, Ethan fell asleep with the faint ghost of Sophia's perfume still clinging to his suit jacket, and for the first time in 3 years he didn't dream about Caroline dying. He dreamed about dancing. Sophia's black sedan sat in Ethan's driveway for a full minute before she emerged, hands gripping the steering wheel like it might anchor her to something solid. Through the living room window, Ethan watched her stare at his front door as if it might bite, and something about her hesitation made his own nervousness settle into something closer to certainty. Liam pressed his face against the glass beside him, breath fogging the pain. Is that her? Yes, buddy. And maybe don't mention the car or how nice it is compared to ours. Why not? Because it might make her uncomfortable. But it's just a car. You're right. Ethan ruffled his son's hair, which immediately sprang back into its characteristic mess, defying gravity and any attempt at order. Ready to meet her? Liam nodded, then hesitated, turning to look up at his father with an expression far too serious for 9 years old. Dad, is she your girlfriend? The question landed like a fist to the solar plexus. What? No, we work together. She's helping with your project. Mrs. Maggie said you met someone. Mrs. Maggie needs to mind her own business. Ethan muttered it, then caught himself. I mean, yes, I met someone, but meeting someone and having a girlfriend are very different things. But you like her. It wasn't a question, and Liam's knowing look made Ethan feel transparent, like his son could see straight through every careful deflection he'd constructed. I barely know her, buddy. You're wearing the blue shirt. The one Mommy said made your eyes look nice. Ethan glanced down at the button-down he'd changed into 3 times before settling on this one, the shirt Caroline had chosen 7 years ago for a work conference, claiming it brought out the blue in his eyes that usually looked gray. It was old, slightly faded at the collar, but apparently still capable of betraying him. It's just a shirt. Uh-huh. Liam grinned with the insufferable confidence of a child who knew he'd caught his father in something. She's pretty. I saw her picture on your phone this morning when you were making breakfast. You're 9. You're not supposed to be this observant. Mommy said I got it from you. Before Ethan could respond, Sophia finally emerged from her car carrying 2 large shopping bags that clinked with the unmistakable sound of craft supplies. She'd dressed down from the gala's elegance, dark jeans, cream sweater hair loose around her shoulders instead of pulled back, but she still moved with that careful precision Ethan recognized from the office, each step measured and controlled. He opened the door before she could knock. Hi. Sophia was slightly breathless pink in the cheeks from December cold, or nervousness, or both. I may have overestimated how much poster board one constellation project requires. And I couldn't remember if you said markers or colored pencils, so I brought both. And glitter, though, if you have a no-glitter policy, I completely understand. That stuff spreads like a virus. We're pro-glitter in this house, Ethan assured her, stepping aside to let her in. Liam, come say hello. His son appeared at Ethan's elbow, studying Sophia with the same intense focus he applied to everything from homework to PBS documentaries about the solar system. Sophia set down her bags and crouched to his eye level, a gesture Ethan hadn't expected, but immediately appreciated something that suggested she actually understood how to talk to children rather than at them. You must be Liam. Your dad tells me you're an expert on constellations. I know 43, and I can find Orion's belt even in the city where there's light pollution. Impressive. I can barely find the Big Dipper. It's easy. You just look for the handle and the bowl. Want me to show you tonight after dinner? Sophia glanced up at Ethan, a question in her eyes that he answered with the smallest shrug, whatever you're comfortable with. I'd like that. But first we have a project to tackle. I'm thinking big epic, the kind of poster board that makes other third graders jealous. Liam's face lit up with the kind of pure joy that made Ethan's chest ache, the expression Caroline used to call his discovery face, the one that appeared when the world offered up something wonderful and unexpected. Really, I brought glow-in-the-dark paint and silver glitter and these little LED lights that we might be able to work in if your dad's okay with me possibly destroying his dining room table. The table's already destroyed. Ethan gestured toward the permanent marker stain from last year's geography project, a dark smudge that no amount of scrubbing had removed. You're not going to make it worse. They moved into the dining room, which Ethan had hastily cleared that morning, shoving aside 3 days' worth of mail and a half-finished jigsaw puzzle Liam had abandoned when something shinier caught his attention. Sophia unpacked her supplies with the same methodical efficiency she brought to project meetings, organizing markers by color, laying out poster board options, setting bottles of glue in a precise row that spoke to years of imposing order on chaos. Liam watched her work with fascination. You're really organized. Occupational hazard. I manage a department of 47 engineers. If I'm not organized, chaos wins. Dad's not organized. He loses his keys every morning. It's true. You put them in different places and then can't remember where. Sophia laughed, the sound genuine and warm, and Ethan felt something in his chest expand to accommodate it. I have a bowl by my front door. Keys go in the bowl every single time. It's the only way I survive. See, Dad? You need a bowl. I'll get a bowl. Ethan said it with more gravity than the situation warranted, then caught Sophia's eye and saw her fighting a smile. Coffee, Sophia. Or I have tea orange juice if you prefer. Coffee would be amazing. Black, please. I haven't actually eaten today, so fair warning I might get jittery around hour 2. Ethan escaped to the kitchen, grateful for the brief reprieve, and through the doorway he could see Sophia and Liam bent over the poster board, his son explaining his vision while she listened with what appeared to be genuine interest, not the forced attention adults sometimes gave children, but real engagement, asking follow-up questions about why he'd chosen certain constellations, whether he wanted to include mythology alongside the astronomy. The coffee maker gurgled and hissed, filling the kitchen with the smell of cheap grounds from Stop and Shop, and Ethan leaned against the counter watching them. This woman who made grown men cry in meetings, now nodding seriously as his 9-year-old son gestured enthusiastically about the relative brightness of Betelgeuse. She's good with him. Ethan murmured it to himself, a small acknowledgement of something he hadn't expected, but desperately wanted to be true. What was that Sophia called from the dining room, and Ethan realized he'd spoken louder than intended. Nothing. Coffee's almost ready. He returned with 2 mugs, one for Sophia, one for himself, and a juice box for Liam, who immediately got distracted trying to stab the straw through the foil hole with the determination of someone solving a complex engineering problem. Sophia accepted the coffee with a grateful smile, took a long sip, and sighed. That's the good stuff. What is that French roast house blend from the grocery store? Ethan admitted, feeling oddly embarrassed by the confession. Caroline always bought the fancy beans from that place downtown, but after I just got whatever was on sale. Sophia's expression softened in a way that made Ethan's throat tight. Store brand tastes better when you're drinking it with good company anyway. They worked for 2 hours straight, Liam dominating the creative direction with the absolute certainty of someone who knew exactly what he wanted. Cassiopeia needed to be bigger because it was his favorite Polaris, required a special gold star. The background should be dark blue instead of black because that's what the sky looked like right after sunset when the first stars appeared. Sophia followed his lead, offering suggestions, but never overriding his choices, showing him how to use a ruler to make straight lines for the constellation connections, demonstrating a technique for layering glitter so it didn't clump into unusable masses. She praised his careful coloring inside the lines while admitting she'd always been terrible at staying within boundaries herself, a confession that made Liam giggle and Ethan wonder what other boundaries she'd struggled against. Your mom would have loved this project. Ethan said it during a break while Liam ran to the bathroom, the observation slipping out before he could consider whether it would land like comfort or pain. Caroline was artistic. She could have made this look museum quality. Sophia set down the marker she'd been holding, meeting his eyes with a directness that felt almost physical. Can I ask you something? Sure. Do you ever worry that talking about her around Liam will make it harder for him, or do you worry that not talking about her will make him forget? The question was so precisely what Ethan had been struggling with for 3 years that he actually laughed, the sound bitter and surprised. Both, constantly, simultaneously. What do you do? I follow his lead. If he brings her up, we talk about her. If he doesn't, I don't force it. Some days he wants to tell stories about her. Other days mentioning her name makes him shut down completely. There's no manual for this. There should be. Sophia said it quietly, something in her voice suggesting she understood more than she was saying. Parenting is hard enough without losing your co-pilot halfway through. Liam returned before Ethan could respond, carrying his constellation chart, a laminated poster he'd gotten from the Harvard Observatory 3 years ago, now creased and worn from constant use. He spread it across the table with the reverence of someone handling sacred text. "Okay, so here's the reference material. We need to make sure the star positions are accurate. Mrs. Rodriguez says scientific accuracy matters even in art projects." Mrs. Rodriguez sounds smart. Sophia studied the chart with genuine interest. "Let's get it right." By 5 o'clock, the poster board was taking shape, constellations sparkling against the dark blue background connected by silver lines that caught the overhead light. Liam had carefully labeled each one in his best handwriting, which was still quite terrible, but Sophia assured him that astronomers probably had bad handwriting too, given how much time they spent looking up instead of writing down. Ethan ordered pizza because cooking felt like admitting the afternoon had an end point, and Sophia tried to decline, said she should probably get going. But Liam's disappointed face was enough to convince her to stay just a little longer, just for dinner, just to see how the project turned out. They ate in the living room, Liam wedged between Ethan and Sophia on the couch, telling Sophia about the observatory trips he used to take with his mother, while tomato sauce accumulated at the corner of his mouth. Ethan tensed, waiting for the conversation to veer into painful territory, but Liam spoke matter-of-factly about Caroline treating her memory like a fact rather than a wound. Mommy knew all the stories. Like Cassiopeia was a queen who bragged too much about being beautiful, so she got punished by being put in the sky upside down for half the year. His mouth was full of pepperoni words barely intelligible. And Orion was a hunter who got killed by a scorpion, which is why they're on opposite sides of the sky and never appear together. I didn't know that the scorpion detail, I mean. Sophia was watching Liam with something that looked like wonder. Most people don't. Mommy said the sky is full of stories that people forgot to remember. Liam paused, pizza forgotten in his hand, and his voice went quieter. She forgot to remember lots of stuff at the end. The medicine made her fuzzy. Ethan's throat tightened, the familiar ache of grief mixing with something sharper. Pride, maybe that his son could talk about this without falling apart, that Caroline's death hadn't destroyed Liam's ability to speak her name. "Buddy, you don't have to." "It's okay, Dad." Sophia asked about the constellations. "I'm just explaining." Liam turned to Sophia with complete seriousness, the kind of gravity that made him seem decades older than 9. "She forgot my name sometimes, but she always remembered the stars. Even at the hospital, she'd make Dad open the curtains so she could see the sky." Sophia's hand found Ethan's knee under the pizza box, a brief squeeze that communicated more than words could acknowledge: sympathy, solidarity in the face of loss that never quite stopped hurting. Ethan concentrated on breathing, on not falling apart in front of his 9-year-old, who was handling his dead mother's memory with more grace than Ethan had managed in 3 years. "She sounds like she was an amazing person." Sophia's voice stayed soft, careful. "She was okay." Liam said it with the brutal honesty of children who hadn't yet learned that some truths needed softening. "She got mad sometimes, and she burned dinner a lot, but she gave the best hugs, the kind that made you feel like nothing bad could happen. Those are the best kind." Sophia agreed, and something in her expression suggested she knew exactly what Liam meant, that she'd lost someone who gave those kinds of hugs too. They finished the pizza in comfortable silence, and Liam fell asleep against Sophia's shoulder halfway through a PBS documentary about Mars that Ethan put on mostly to avoid navigating the emotional minefield of where the conversation had gone. Sophia didn't move, just sat there with Liam's weight against her one hand, absently smoothing his hair, while the narrator explained atmospheric composition and the challenges of sustained human presence on another planet. Ethan watched them, his son, and this woman he barely knew who'd somehow become part of his Sunday afternoon in a way that felt both terrifying and inevitable, and wondered what Sophia was thinking, whether she regretted coming, whether this was too much, too fast, too complicated. "I should get him to bed." Ethan whispered it when the documentary ended, careful not to wake Liam. Sophia nodded, and Ethan scooped up his son, who mumbled something about nebulas without waking, and carried him upstairs. The bedtime routine unfolded on autopilot: shoes, off jeans, replaced with pajama pants, blanket pulled up to chin, glow-in-the-dark stars, checked to ensure they were still glowing properly. Liam stirred as Ethan turned to leave. Dad? Yeah, buddy. I like her. Sophia. She's nice. She is nice. Is she going to come back? Ethan hesitated, caught between honesty and hope. I don't know. Maybe. I hope she does. She laughs at my jokes. Most grown-ups just pretend to think they're funny. Ethan smiled in the darkness, smoothing Liam's hair back from his forehead. Get some sleep. School tomorrow. Dad. Liam's voice was smaller now, uncertain in a way that made Ethan's chest constrict. Is it okay that I like her? Even though Mommy's gone? The question broke something in Ethan's chest and put it back together simultaneously, splintering old grief to make room for new possibility. He sat on the edge of Liam's bed, hand on his son's shoulder, feeling the rapid beat of a child's heart through thin pajamas. It's more than okay. Mommy would want you to have people in your life who make you happy. That's how love works. It doesn't replace other love, it just adds to it. Like how the sky has room for all the stars. Exactly like that. Okay. Good night, Dad. Good night, buddy. When Ethan returned downstairs, Sophia was washing the pizza plates at the kitchen sink despite his protests that she didn't need to clean, that she'd already done more than enough. She dried her hands on the dish towel cartoon vegetables, something Caroline had bought on impulse at a farmer's market 6 years ago, and turned to face him with an expression he couldn't quite read. He's a great kid. You should be proud. I'm terrified every day. That I'm screwing it up, that he'll grow up and realize I had no idea what I was doing. That's just parenting, single or otherwise. Sophia folded the dish towel with precise corners, a small gesture that spoke to her need for order even in borrowed kitchens. My mother raised me alone after my father died. She was terrified too. I found her journal years later, pages and pages of self-doubt, wondering if she was doing enough, being enough. But I turned out okay. Mostly. More than okay. Ethan said it before he could stop himself, and Sophia's expression shifted into something he couldn't quite decipher. You don't actually know that. You know work, Sophia, spreadsheets and quarterly reviews and project deadlines. That's not the same as knowing me. So let me know you. The words hung between them heavier than Ethan had intended, weighted with implications he wasn't sure he was ready to examine. Sophia set down the dish towel and turned to face him fully, and Ethan saw something vulnerable cross her features, some internal calculation being run behind her eyes. Ethan, I need to be honest about something. Okay. His stomach dropped, bracing for rejection or regret or some other R word that would explain why this had been a mistake. I didn't come here just to help with the science project. She took a breath, and Ethan waited, heart hammering against his ribs. I came because last night at that gala, talking to you, dancing with you, it was the first time in years I felt like a person instead of a position. And that scared me. It still scares me. Why? Because people in positions don't get hurt. They don't fail at relationships or disappoint children or wake up at 3 a.m. wondering if they're fundamentally broken. Positions are safe. People are messy. Ethan moved closer, closing the distance between them until he could see the faint freckles across her nose that makeup usually hid, the tiny scar at her hairline that suggested childhood mishap or adult accident. I'm terrified too. Of this, of you being here in my house where Caroline used to be, of Liam getting attached to someone who might leave, of letting myself want something when I've spent 3 years convinced that wanting was greedy. Is it working? The not wanting, no. Ethan laughed, but it sounded hollow, scraping against his throat. Turns out feelings don't care about good intentions. Sophia reached for his hand the same way she had on the dance floor 12 hours ago, and Ethan felt the contact like electricity, something that traveled up his arm and lodged somewhere behind his sternum. What if we tried something radical? What's that? Stop being so careful. Not reckless. I don't think either of us knows how to be reckless, but maybe we could try being honest instead of safe. Honest about what? About the fact that I drove around your block 3 times before parking because I was so nervous. About how I bought enough poster board for 6 projects because I was afraid one wouldn't be enough and you'd think I was unprepared. About how sitting on your couch with your son asleep on my shoulder felt more like home than my penthouse apartment has in the entire year I've lived there. Ethan's heart was doing something complicated in his chest rhythm, irregular and too fast, like it was trying to remember a pattern it had forgotten. You drove around the block 3 times. Your neighbors probably think I'm casing the place. I changed my shirt 4 times. I noticed. The blue suits you. They stood there in Ethan's kitchen, hands joined, both of them trembling slightly with the weight of what they weren't quite saying. The overhead light hummed its familiar electric drone. The refrigerator kicked on with a mechanical groan, and somewhere in the neighborhood a dog barked at some perceived threat or imagined adventure. I don't know how to do this. Ethan admitted it quietly, the confession easier in the dim light with Sophia's hand warm in his. Dating, relationships, any of it. Caroline was my high school sweetheart. I've never had to figure out how adults navigate this stuff. I'm not much better. Sophia's voice went soft, almost apologetic. My last relationship ended 4 years ago when my boyfriend proposed, and I panicked so badly I threw up in the restaurant bathroom, then took a job in another city to avoid having the breakup conversation in person. That's deeply dysfunctional. I know. My therapist and I have worked through it extensively. I was going to say understandable. Commitment is terrifying. It is when you've watched your mother grieve your father for 26 years and counting, when you've seen what love costs when it ends badly. Sophia's grip on his hand tightened, and Ethan realized she was holding on as much for her own stability as his. But maybe it's more terrifying to keep avoiding it because we're scared of the price. What are you saying? I'm saying, I'd like to have dinner with you. Real dinner, not pizza on a couch with your son as a buffer. Just us in a restaurant navigating the awkwardness of first date conversation like normal people who aren't boss and employee. You're still technically my boss. Actually, as of Friday afternoon, I'm not. Sophia pulled a folded piece of paper from her pocket. Official Morrison and Fletcher letterhead, the corporate restructuring memo that would be announced Monday morning. Ethan scanned it quickly. His team transferred under Marcus Reed's division, Sophia refocusing exclusively on R&D, effective immediately. You knew about this at the gala. I signed off on it Thursday, announced it internally Friday, which means when I asked you to dance last night there was no boss-employee dynamic in play, just 2 people at a party. Why didn't you say something? Because I wanted to see if this, she gestured between them with her free hand, was real without the complication of workplace hierarchy. I needed to know if you'd talk to me like a person when you didn't have to. Ethan processed this information, turning it over in his mind, examining it for angles and implications and potential complications. That's very calculated. That's very me, Sophia corrected gently. I don't do anything without thinking through the logistics first. It's my greatest strength and my most significant flaw. Dinner. Just us. When Friday. There's a bistro downtown, I know it. Ethan interrupted, and Sophia's face fell slightly before he continued. Caroline and I went there for our anniversary every year. But I'd like to go with you, make new memories. The food's good, and they have this chocolate torte that's probably illegal in several states. Sophia's expression relaxed, relief flooding her features. Chocolate torte sounds perfect. They walked to the front door together, neither quite ready to end the day, but both aware it needed to end, that staying longer would cross some invisible line from possibility into something more concrete and therefore more frightening. Sophia gathered her coat and bag, leaving behind the craft supplies for Liam to finish his project during the week. Thank you. Ethan said it because inadequate words were better than silence. For today, for being patient with Liam, for being honest with me. Thank you for letting me in. Sophia replied, pulling on her coat, literally and figuratively. She leaned in, and for a heart-stopping moment Ethan thought she might kiss him. Wanted her to kiss him with an intensity that surprised him, but instead she pressed her lips to his cheek, a gesture somehow more intimate than a kiss would have been, intentional and tender and full of promise. Friday, 7 o'clock. I'll pick you up. I'm perfectly capable of, I know you are, but let me do this one old-fashioned thing. Please. Sophia smiled, and it transformed her face into something luminous. 7 o'clock. Don't be late. She left, and Ethan watched her drive away, tail lights disappearing around the corner where the street curved toward the main road. The house felt different in her absence, not emptier exactly, but aware of the space she'd occupied, like the air itself had been rearranged by her presence. The dining room still smelled like glitter glue and poster paint. Liam's constellation chart lay on the coffee table. A coffee mug with Sophia's lipstick print sat in the kitchen sink. Ethan picked up the mug, started to wash it, then stopped. He left it there. Evidence that someone new had been in his space, had drunk coffee in his kitchen, had sat on his couch and let his son fall asleep on her shoulder. Friday arrived with the kind of anxiety Ethan hadn't felt since high school prom, standing in front of his closet at 6:15, having already showered and shaved and changed shirts twice. The blue one Liam had noticed lay on the bed, rejected for being too obvious. The gray made him look washed out under bathroom fluorescent. The white had a coffee stain he'd somehow missed until now. "Dad, you're freaking out," Liam observed from the doorway, still in his school clothes backpack abandoned in the hallway. "I'm not freaking out. I'm selecting appropriate dinner attire." "You've been in here for 20 minutes. Mrs. Maggie says that's freaking out." "When did you talk to Mrs. Maggie?" "She came over after school. You forgot to tell her you had a date tonight, so she brought lasagna thinking we'd need dinner." Liam grinned with the satisfaction of someone who'd just revealed crucial intelligence. "She's really excited. Said it's about time you rejoin the living." "What does that mean?" Ethan grabbed the blue shirt off the bed and pulled it on, fumbling with buttons that suddenly seemed too small for his fingers. "It means Mrs. Maggie needs to learn about boundaries, and you need to finish your homework before she gets here to babysit." "Already done. Math, spelling, and reading log. Want to check it?" "Since when do you finish homework without being reminded 7 times?" Liam shrugged with elaborate casualness, pulling a crumpled piece of paper from his pocket. "Sophia said, organization makes life easier, so I'm trying it. I even made a checklist. See?" He produced the paper with pride items listed in careful handwriting, each one checked off with a star beside the particularly important ones. Homework, backpack, lunchbox, feed fish. The fish one has a star because I forget him a lot. Ethan's throat tightened, seeing how Sophia had influenced his son in just 5 days, small changes that added up to something that looked suspiciously like hope. "That's great, buddy. Really great." "How do I look?" Liam tilted his head, assessing with the brutal honesty children specialized in. "Your hair's weird on one side and you missed a button, but otherwise okay." Ethan fixed the button and attempted to tame his hair with water that immediately evaporated, leaving him looking exactly the same as before. "Good enough." Dad Liam's voice went serious, dropping the teasing edge. "Are you nervous because of Sophia or because of Mommy?" The question cut straight through Ethan's carefully constructed composure, exposing nerves he'd been trying to ignore. He sat on the edge of the bed, and Liam climbed up beside him without being asked, small shoulder pressing against Ethan's ribs. "Both, I think. I'm nervous about Sophia because I haven't been on a date in 15 years and I have no idea what I'm doing. And I'm nervous about Mommy because—" He paused, searching for words that would make sense to a 9-year-old, "because loving someone new feels like I'm leaving her behind, even though I know that's not how it works. Like when we moved my bed away from the window." Liam said it matter-of-factly, and Ethan blinked at the comparison. "What?" "Remember after Mommy died, I wanted my bed by the window so I could see the stars. But then last year I wanted to move it because the sun woke me up too early and you said it was okay to change things, even if Mommy helped pick where the bed went the first time. I remember. This is like that. You're just moving the bed. Mommy's still there, the bed's still there, everything's just in a different spot." Liam leaned against Ethan's shoulder, and Ethan wrapped an arm around his son, marveling at the wisdom children possessed when adults stopped underestimating them. "When did you get so smart? I've always been smart. You just don't always listen." "Fair point." Mrs. Maggie arrived at 6:30 carrying not just lasagna, but also homemade cookies, and what appeared to be tactical surveillance questions disguised as friendly conversation. "So, this Sophia, she's the boss lady from the company gala, former boss. Organizational restructuring. We're in different departments now." "Very convenient timing. That's what I said." Liam chimed in, and Ethan shot him a look that promised they'd be discussing appropriate conversation topics later. Nobody asked you. Then to Mrs. Maggie. Yes, fine. It's convenient, but it's also legitimate. The restructuring made operational sense. Mrs. Maggie hummed noncommittally, the sound conveying volumes of skepticism, while she unpacked food with the efficiency of someone who'd spent decades managing households. And she came here Sunday, helped with the science project, stayed for dinner. Owen invited her to stay because Dad wanted her to, but was too scared to ask. Liam added helpfully, and Ethan felt his face heat. Traitor. Mrs. Maggie smiled, the expression warm despite her interrogation tactics. I'm just making sure you know what you're doing. It's been 3 years, Ethan. You deserve happiness. But Liam deserves stability. If this woman is she's not just anything. Ethan interrupted, surprised by the vehemence in his own voice. I don't know what she is yet, but she's not casual. Not to me. Good. Mrs. Maggie patted his arm with the same sympathy she'd offered for 3 years, but this time it felt different, like approval rather than pity. Then go be nervous, spill wine on yourself, say awkward things. That's what first dates are for. Ethan kissed the top of Liam's head, grabbed his wallet and keys from the bowl. The bowl, because Sophia had been right about that, and headed for the door. His hands shook slightly as he started the car, and the drive to Sophia's apartment building took 12 minutes, during which Ethan rehearsed conversation topics, rejected most of them as boring or inappropriate, and settled on just trying to be honest. The building was one of those modern high-rises in Back Bay, all glass and steel and probably outrageous monthly fees. The doorman called up to announce Ethan's arrival with professional courtesy that made Ethan acutely aware of his department store suit and 7-year-old sedan parked at the curb. Sophia appeared in the lobby exactly at 7, and Ethan forgot how to breathe. She'd abandoned her work uniform entirely. The dress was simple, dark red, falling just below her knees with a neckline that was elegant without being provocative. Her hair was down again, falling in loose waves around her shoulders, and she wore different perfume than at the gala, something warmer and less formal that seemed to announce this was Sophia, the person rather than Sophia, the VP. Hi. She was slightly breathless, pink in the cheeks. Sorry, I changed outfits 4 times and still wasn't sure about this one. Too much perfect. You look perfect. You clean up pretty well yourself. Is that the blue shirt? Liam said. It made my eyes look nice. Liam's a smart kid. Sophia grabbed a coat from the doorman with a thank you that included the man's name, Robert, suggesting she actually paid attention to the people around her instead of just moving through the world in her own bubble. Ready. The bistro was a 15-minute drive, during which they made awkward small talk about traffic and weather and whether the city's new parking regulations made any sense, the kind of meaningless conversation that filled space while both of them worked up courage to say something that mattered. Ethan parked, came around to open Sophia's door before she could do it herself, and tried not to visibly panic when she took his offered arm. Inside the restaurant was exactly as Ethan remembered: warm lighting, exposed brick walls, small tables with white tablecloths and single candles. He'd sat at a corner table with Caroline every anniversary for 9 years, watching her laugh over wine and pasta, planning futures they'd never get to have. Ethan, Sophia's voice pulled him back. You okay? We can go somewhere else if... No, I want to be here. With you. He squeezed her hand. New memories, remember. They were seated at a different table, not the corner one, thank whatever deity governed, small mercies. And the waiter brought water, recited specials, left them with menus, and a promise to return. Sophia studied her options with the same focus she probably applied to quarterly reports. The salmon looks good, but so does the pasta. And the steak. Why is making decisions so hard when there's no wrong answer? Because you're used to decisions that have consequences. Bad project management loses money. Bad salmon just means you order something else next time. Spoken like someone who's done this before. Not in a long time. Caroline and I came here for anniversaries. She always got the mushroom risotto, I always got chicken marsala. We never deviated. Looking back, it seems boring. Sophia set down her menu. Or it seems like you found something that worked and didn't feel the need to fix it. That's not boring. That's comfortable. Is comfortable good or bad? Depends on whether you're talking about marriage or shoes. She smiled, and something in Ethan's chest unclenched. In marriage, comfortable sounds pretty ideal. In footwear, it's essential. In restaurant choices may be worth branching out occasionally. So you're saying I should get the salmon. I'm saying we should order 3 things and share everything. Life's too short for limited data points. They did exactly that. Salmon, pasta, steak, and Sophia ordered wine with the kind of casual knowledge that suggested she actually understood the difference between regions and vintages. Ethan nodded along, pretending he cared about tannins and oak aging, when really he was just watching the way candlelight caught in her eyes, turning them more green than hazel, illuminating tiny gold flecks he'd never noticed before. "You're staring. Sorry, this is surreal. 4 days ago you were my boss. Now we're sharing entrees and discussing wine. Technically, I was your boss 6 days ago. The restructuring went through Friday morning." Sophia took a sip of water. "Does it bother you that I orchestrated the timing? Should it? Some people would say it's manipulative that I moved pieces around to get what I wanted." Ethan considered this while the waiter delivered their food, 3 plates arranged artfully, portions smaller than Ethan was used to, but smelling incredible. "Did you compromise the company's operational efficiency to make this happen?" "No, the restructuring made sense regardless. We'd been planning it since August. Did you harm anyone's career in the process?" "Actually, 3 people got promotions, including Marcus Reed, who's been angling for broader management responsibility. Then you didn't manipulate anything, you just recognized an opportunity and took it." Ethan reached across the table, finding her hand. "That's what good leaders do. They see the whole board and make moves that solve multiple problems simultaneously." Sophia's fingers interlaced with his, and Ethan felt the contact in his chest, his stomach, places that had been numb for 3 years. "My therapist would say, I'm overcomplicating things because emotional vulnerability terrifies me." "What do you say I say? She's probably right, but I'm paying her $200 an hour to tell me things I already know, so who's really winning that relationship?" They ate, sharing bites off each other's plates, offering commentary on each dish. The salmon was excellent, the pasta good but too salty, the steak perfect, cooked precisely medium rare the way Ethan preferred, but never ordered because Caroline had been vegetarian and he'd gotten used to accommodating her preferences. "Tell me about the proposal, the one that made you throw up and flee to another city." "We're really doing this?" "You brought up your therapist. Fair game." "Fine." Sophia set down her fork with more force than necessary. "His name was Derek, investment banker, very successful, very traditional. We'd been dating 2 years and I knew he was going to propose because he's terrible at keeping secrets, and I found the ring receipt in his jacket pocket." She pushed pasta around her plate, not eating. "He took me to this incredibly expensive restaurant, got down on one knee, said all the right things, and I just panicked. Like full-body can't-breathe, world-ending panic." "What scared you?" "The permanence, I think. The idea that I was supposed to want this, and I didn't, or I did, but not with him, or I did with him, but not enough to override the terror of becoming my mother, loving someone so completely that losing them destroyed everything." Sophia looked up, meeting Ethan's eyes. "I locked myself in the bathroom, threw up twice, crawled out the window, took a cab home, submitted my resignation. Monday morning, took a position with Morrison and Fletcher 3 weeks later." "Did you ever talk to him?" "Derek? I sent a very long, very cowardly email. He responded with 2 words, 'I understand,' which somehow made it worse." Sophia drained half her wine. "I've sabotaged every relationship I've had since my father died. Too scared to commit, too stubborn to quit trying. My therapist says it's a trauma response. I say it's a character flaw. Or it's just not finding the right person at the right time." Ethan suggested carefully, "You can't force compatibility. Is that what we are? Compatible?" The question hung between them, weighted with implications neither seemed ready to fully examine. "I think we might be. But I also think we're both terrified of what that means." "Terrified is underselling it. I'm petrified." Sophia's honesty felt like a gift. "You have a son who's already lost one parent. If I screw this up, then we deal with it together like adults." Ethan squeezed her hand. "Liam asked me tonight if I was nervous about you or about Caroline. And the honest answer is both. I'm terrified of wanting this and having it fall apart, but I'm more terrified of not trying because I'm scared. The song ended. Ethan hadn't even noticed music playing, and Sophia smiled something sad around the edges. That's very brave. That's very desperate. There's a difference. The waiter cleared their plates and offered dessert menus with the practiced efficiency of someone who'd seen 1,000 first dates and knew exactly when to appear and when to vanish. Sophia ordered the chocolate torte without looking at the menu, and Ethan felt something warm spread through his chest at the small gesture of trust. "Can I tell you something terrible?" Sophia asked when the waiter left. "Please." "When I got home Sunday night after helping with the poster board, I cried for an hour. Just sat in my apartment and sobbed like an idiot." Ethan's chest tightened. "Why?" "Because it was the first time I'd felt part of something in years. Part of a family. Part of a moment. Part of something real that wasn't spreadsheets and quarterly projections. And I realized how much I'd been lying to myself about being fine alone." She wiped at her eyes with the back of her hand, mascara smudging slightly. "Sitting in your living room with pizza and a PBS documentary and a 9-year-old who fell asleep mid-sentence that felt more like home than anything I've built in my 34 years. Sophia, I'm not finished." She took a shaky breath. "I need to say this while I have courage. I don't know if I'm good at this, relationships, families, any of it, but I want to try. With you, with Liam. I want to try being part of something instead of just managing things from a distance." Ethan stood up, came around the table and pulled Sophia to her feet, aware that other diners probably stared, that the waiter had definitely paused mid-service, not caring about any of it. He wrapped his arms around her and held her, while she cried quietly into his shoulder, her expensive perfume mixing with the smell of salmon and wine and possibility. "We're both disasters. But maybe disasters work better in pairs. That's the least romantic thing anyone's ever said to me. Give me time, I'll get worse." They sat back down to cold entrees and melted candles, and the waiter tactfully pretended not to notice Sophia's mascara situation, offering dessert menus with the kind of professional discretion that probably earned excellent tips. The chocolate torte arrived dense and perfect with 2 forks and a dollop of whipped cream that was probably 30% of Ethan's daily calorie allowance. They ate in comfortable silence, and Ethan marveled at how natural this felt, sharing dessert with someone new, building memories in a place haunted by old ones choosing to move forward instead of staying frozen. "I need to tell you something." Sophia set down her fork, expression serious. "Something important." Ethan's stomach dropped. "Okay." "The restructuring, moving your team to Marcus's division, that happens all the time, corporate fluidity. But there's a condition that could complicate things. What condition? I'm being considered for VP of Operations. Promotion gets announced next quarter if the board approves, which they probably will, because I've exceeded every metric they've thrown at me." Sophia met his eyes. "It means longer hours, more travel, higher profile within the company. And if this is something we're actually pursuing, people will notice. They'll talk. Let them talk." "Ethan, I'm serious. Office politics can be vicious. If people think you're getting favorable treatment because we're involved, then I'll work twice as hard to prove I'm not." Ethan reached for her hand again, grounding himself in the physical connection. "I'm not going to hide this us. Whatever we're building. I spent 3 years hiding from life. I'm done with that. You might regret that confidence when some mid-level manager starts spreading rumors. I survived watching my wife die over 18 months. I think I can handle office gossip." The words came out harsher than Ethan intended, but he didn't take them back, and Sophia flinched slightly before her expression softened. Okay. Let's be disasters together. Let's navigate complications. Let's see if broken people can build something that doesn't break." She smiled, wobbly but genuine. "But I'm keeping my apartment for at least 6 months because I'm terrified and practical in equal measure. I wouldn't expect anything less." They finished dessert, paid the check, splitting it despite Ethan's protests, Sophia insisting with the kind of firmness that suggested this mattered to her, that equality in small things built foundation for bigger ones, and walked out into the December night. The temperature had dropped while they were inside, cold enough that Ethan offered his jacket without thinking, and Sophia accepted it with a small smile that suggested she could handle the cold just fine, but appreciated the gesture anyway. "Can I ask you something?" Sophia said as they walked to the car. "Anything." When Liam asked if your bed was big enough for two, she paused, choosing words carefully. "Was that just about logistics, or was it about whether you have room in your life for someone new?" Ethan stopped walking, turning to face her under a streetlight that cast everything in amber, making Sophia look softer, somehow less guarded. Both, probably. Liam's got a gift for asking questions that sound simple but cut straight to the complicated parts. "And what's the answer? Do you have room?" Ethan thought about his bedroom. The king-size bed he'd finally centered after 3 years against the wall. Just last week moved it on impulse after coming home from the gala, with Sophia's words echoing in his head about survival versus living. About the closet where Caroline's clothes had hung until last winter when Mrs. Maggie had gently suggested maybe it was time. About the photos on the dresser that he'd stopped avoiding and started remembering fondly instead of painfully. The bed's big enough. As long as you're patient with the fact that some mornings I might wake up feeling guilty for being happy, that sometimes I'll say Caroline's name by accident, that Liam might have hard days where he needs me to just be his dad and nothing else. And you have to be patient with the fact that I'll probably overanalyze everything, retreat into work when emotions get overwhelming, and occasionally panic about commitment because my brain's wired to see permanence as dangerous. Sophia stepped closer. "But I want to try. Despite all of it, maybe because of all of it." Ethan kissed her then, right there under the streetlight with December cold biting at their faces, and his jacket draped over her shoulders, tasting like chocolate and wine and the terrifying sweetness of second chances. Sophia made a small sound of surprise before kissing him back, her hands finding their way into his hair, pulling him closer with an urgency that suggested she'd been waiting for this as long as he had. When they broke apart, both breathing hard, Sophia laughed shakily. "That was overdue. I was going to say terrifying, but overdue works too." They drove back to Sophia's apartment in charged silence, hands clasped over the center console, the radio playing quiet jazz that neither of them paid attention to. Ethan walked her to the building entrance where Robert the doorman pretended not to notice them standing too close. "I should go. Liam's probably convinced Mrs. Maggie to let him stay up past bedtime watching documentaries." "Probably." Sophia played with the collar of his jacket, still wearing it despite being steps from her heated lobby. "When can I see you again tomorrow? Liam has a soccer game at 10. You could come if you want, no pressure." "I'd love to." Sophia kissed him again, quick and sweet. "Thank you for tonight. For being honest, for not running when I cried into your salmon. You cried into my shoulder." The salmon was innocent. Semantics. She handed back his jacket, and Ethan immediately missed its absence the way it had looked on her evidence of something shared. "Good night, Ethan." "Good night, Sophia." He waited until she was inside before driving home, where he found Liam and Mrs. Maggie exactly as predicted. On the couch documentary, paused Liam fighting sleep with the determination of someone who knew bedtime was negotiable with the right babysitter. "Dad." Liam scrambled up, suddenly awake. "How was it? Did you kiss her? Did she like the restaurant? Are you getting married?" Owen breathed. Ethan scooped him up, despite the fact that 9-year-olds were really getting too big for this. "It was good. Yes. Yes. And absolutely not yet." Mrs. Maggie gathered her things with a knowing smile. "Yet. I like that word. It implies possibility. It implies I'm not proposing to someone after one date." Caroline would approve. Mrs. Maggie said it firmly, like she had authority on the matter. "That girl made you happy. This one makes you hopeful. That's different, that's important." After she left, Ethan carried Liam upstairs, both of them going through the bedtime routine on autopilot, teeth, brushed pajamas on glow-in-the-dark stars checked for optimal brightness. "She's coming to my game tomorrow," Liam said as Ethan tucked him in. "She is. Is that okay?" "Yeah. I want her to see me play even though I'm not very good." "You're great at defense." "That's what bad players do, Dad. Everyone knows that." Ethan laughed despite himself. "Fair point. But you try hard, that counts for something." Liam was quiet for a moment, picking at his blanket. "Dad, is Sophia going to be my new mom?" The question punched the air from Ethan's lungs, stealing breath and coherent thought simultaneously. We haven't even talked about. It's really early to. I don't want a new mom." Liam interrupted, and Ethan's heart fractured. "I have a mom. She's just not here anymore. But maybe Sophia could be something else, like, I don't know, a bonus person. Someone who's ours, but different." Ethan sat on the edge of the bed, struggling to process his 9-year-old's emotional intelligence, wondering when his son had gotten so wise about things that still made adults stumble. A bonus person. I like that. Do you love her? I barely know her, buddy. But do you think you could love her eventually? Ethan thought about Sophia crying in the restaurant, about her organizing markers and making checklists with Liam, about the way she'd admitted to being terrified and chosen to try anyway. Yeah, I think I could. Is that okay with me? Only if she likes me too. Not just dad and kid package deal, but actually likes me as a person. She does. I promise. Okay then. Liam yawned, finally surrendering to sleep. Can she bring snacks to the game? Mrs. Maggie never brings good snacks. I'll ask her about the snacks. Ethan kissed his son's forehead and stood to leave, but Liam's voice stopped him at the door. Dad, Mommy would like her. Sophia. She would have thought she was smart and nice and good for us. How do you know? Because Mommy always said you needed someone who could keep up with your brain. And Sophia's really smart. Plus she laughs at your terrible jokes. Mommy always said that was important. Ethan's vision blurred and he nodded, not trusting his voice, pulling Liam's door to its usual crack of open before standing in the hallway for a long moment, processing the conversation, marveling at how his son could articulate feelings Ethan was still struggling to name. In his own room, Nathan changed for bed and lay down in the center of his properly positioned mattress, the bed he'd moved away from the wall in a moment of brave stupidity or stupid bravery, he still wasn't sure which. His phone buzzed with a text from Sophia. Made it to bed. Can't stop thinking about tonight, about you, about everything. Is it too soon to say I'm already counting down to tomorrow? S. Ethan smiled in the darkness, typing his response. Not too soon. I've been counting since I dropped you off. Sleep well, dream of soccer games and questionable snacks. E. Looking forward to both. Good night, Ethan. S. He set the phone aside and stared at the ceiling, at the faint glow from Liam's room across the hall, where 43 constellations worth of plastic stars created their own small universe. Outside, the real stars burned in patterns humans had named thousands of years ago, connecting dots across impossible distances, making meaning from chaos, because that's what people did. They found patterns built. Stories insisted that random points of light meant something more than accident. Ethan closed his eyes and let himself imagine a future where Sophia came to soccer games and helped with homework and slowly, carefully became part of the fabric of their lives, where broken people built something stronger from their fractures, where love didn't divide but multiplied, expanding to fill whatever space opened up to receive it. His bed was big enough. His heart was big enough. The question had never been about space. It had been about courage, about choosing to try despite the terror, about believing that happiness wasn't a betrayal of grief, but a transformation of it. Ethan fell asleep thinking about Sophia's laugh, about Liam's acceptance, about second chances and new beginnings, and the radical possibility that maybe, just maybe, they were all going to be okay. The backyard proposal happened on a Sunday afternoon in November, nothing like the elaborate productions Ethan had seen in movies or the careful planning Derek had attempted with Sophia 4 years ago. Liam was supposedly doing homework at the patio table, but had actually constructed an elaborate obstacle course for Rocket, using lawn furniture and garden hoses, the golden retriever they'd adopted from a New England rescue shelter, bounding through it with the enthusiasm of an athlete who didn't understand the concept of losing. Sophia sat on the back steps reading a paperback mystery coffee going cold in her mug, wearing sweatpants with a hole in the knee, and one of Ethan's MIT sweatshirts that she'd claimed as her own 3 months after moving in. The October leaves needed raking the fence. Still had that broken board Ethan kept meaning to fix, and everything about the moment was ordinary, except for the way Ethan's heart was hammering against his ribs like it was trying to escape. Sophia. She looked up from her book, marking her place with a receipt from CVS. Marry me. The words came out flat, graceless. Nothing like the speeches he'd rehearsed in his head during the drive home from work, during showers, during the 100 small moments when he'd almost asked and chickened out. What, marry me? Not eventually, not someday soon. Because I don't want to wait anymore. Don't want to keep calling you my girlfriend when you're so much more than that. Don't want Liam to wonder where you fit when you fit everywhere. Sophia set down her book with shaking hands, and Ethan realized he was still standing 10 feet away holding a rake, probably the least romantic proposal setup in human history. Ethan, you can't just... We've talked about everything else. Finances and parenting and whether we want more kids and what happens if I die first. The only thing we haven't talked about is when we're making this official. He dropped the rake and moved to kneel in front of her, taking her hands in his, aware that his jeans were grass-stained, and he didn't have a ring, and this was nothing like how proposals were supposed to go. I don't have a ring, didn't plan this, but I'm asking anyway. Marry me, Sophia. Be Liam's bonus parent legally and officially be my wife. Be part of this family, not just in practice, but in name. Dad, are you proposing? Liam's voice carried across the yard, and Ethan turned to find his son had abandoned the obstacle course, Rocket bounding behind him with a tennis ball in his mouth. Yes, buddy. Is that okay? Liam ran over, sliding to a stop beside Sophia with the gracelessness of 10-year-olds who'd recently hit a growth spurt. Are you saying yes? You have to say yes. We already put you on the family tree. It would be really awkward if you said no. Sophia was crying and laughing simultaneously, mascara-free tears tracking down her cheeks. Now you're right. We've committed in poster board. That's legally binding in 9 states. I don't think that's true. Say yes anyway. She pulled Ethan up from his kneeling position and kissed him hard enough that Liam made exaggerated gagging sounds, Rocket barking in confused solidarity. When they broke apart, Sophia was nodding, words tumbling out between gasps. Yes, obviously yes, just give me a minute to process that. You proposed in your backyard wearing paint-stained jeans while I'm in sweatpants with coffee stains. It's perfect. We're not fancy people. We're sweatpants and coffee stains and backyard proposals. That's who we are. We need to celebrate, Liam announced with the authority of someone who'd clearly been thinking about this. Can we get cake? We should get cake. All good celebrations involve cake. They piled into Ethan's sedan, him, Sophia, Liam, and Rocket, who refused to be left behind, and drove to the bakery downtown where they bought an enormous chocolate cake that the baker decorated with congratulations in pink frosting, despite having no idea what they were celebrating. They ate it for dinner while sitting on the living room floor because Liam declared that celebrations required breaking normal rules, and Sophia fed Rocket bits of frosting when she thought Ethan wasn't looking. That night, after Liam was asleep and Rocket was snoring on his bed, Ethan and Victoria lay together in the center of their shared bed, the one that had finally stopped being his and become theirs, somewhere around the 3rd month of Sophia living there. We should pick a date. Sophia's voice was drowsy content. Make it official. What kind of wedding do you want, small? Just family and close friends, nothing elaborate. Maybe the backyard where you proposed in paint-stained jeans. The backyard where I proposed in paint-stained jeans. The backyard where we built a family, where Liam chases Rocket and we drink coffee on the steps and everything good started. Spring then. April maybe. Give us time to plan, but not so long we overthink it. April sounds perfect. The wedding happened on a Saturday in April in the backyard they'd transformed with string lights borrowed from 3 different neighbors and chairs Mrs. Maggie had somehow procured from the church basement. 40 people gathered, colleagues from Morrison and Fletcher, neighbors who'd watched this unlikely family come together, Liam's friends from school, and their parents who'd stopped looking at Ethan with pity sometime around the 2nd year. Liam carried the rings with the solemnity of someone who understood the importance of the moment, dressed in a suit that would be too small by summer, but fit perfectly now. Sophia wore a simple cream dress she'd found at a boutique in Cambridge, and Ethan wore a suit that actually matched, purchased specifically for this occasion with Sophia's help, because left to his own devices, he'd have shown up in the blue shirt and department store special. Marcus Reed officiated, having gotten certified online specifically for this purpose, opening with words about two people who took the long way to finding each other, who built a family from grief and hope and the stubborn refusal to stay broken. Both Ethan and Sophia were already crying when he got to the vows. Liam presented the rings with pride, and Ethan slipped the band onto Sophia's finger, the metal warm from his son's careful holding. "I promise to love you through complications and coffee stains, through office politics and backyard proposals. I promise to never let you feel like a guest in your own home. I promise to build a life with you that's honest and imperfect and absolutely ours." Sophia's hand shook as she slipped Ethan's ring on the simple gold band they'd chosen together at a jeweler in downtown Boston. "I promise to be patient with your guilt and your grief. I promise to love Liam not as a replacement mother, but as someone who wants the best for him always. I promise to stay even when I'm terrified to choose us, even when it's hard to believe that broken people can build beautiful things." Marcus pronounced them married, and they kissed while their friends and family cheered, and Liam announced to anyone who would listen that he'd told his dad Sophia was the one months ago, and nobody had believed him. The reception was casual, catered barbecue because neither of them wanted to deal with fancy plated dinners, Mrs. Maggie's legendary chocolate cake that she'd been perfecting for weeks, and the playlist Liam had created, which was 70% space documentary soundtracks and somehow worked perfectly. They danced their first dance to a song neither of them remembered choosing, just swaying together while Liam and Rocket played in the background, and everything felt exactly right. Late in the evening, when most guests had left and cleanup was becoming inevitable, Sophia pulled Ethan aside, her expression strange in a way that made his stomach drop. "I have something to tell you, something important. What's wrong?" "Nothing's wrong, but I need to show you something." She led him inside to the bathroom and pulled a small box from her purse, the kind of box that came from pharmacies and contained either relief or catastrophe depending on perspective. "I bought this yesterday. Haven't taken it yet. Wanted to wait until today." Ethan looked at the pregnancy test, then at Sophia, then back at the test, his brain struggling to process information that didn't align with everything they'd discussed. "But you said you didn't want kids. We talked about this." "I don't." "Didn't." Sophia's hands were shaking badly enough that Ethan took the test from her, holding it like it might detonate. "I'm late. 6 weeks late. Thought maybe stress from wedding planning, but then I realized I couldn't remember the last time I wasn't exhausted, and certain smells have been making me nauseous, and... Do you want to take it now?" "I'm terrified. We'll be terrified together. Whatever it says, we deal with it together." Sophia took the test with trembling hands, and they waited the longest 3 minutes of their lives, sitting on the bathroom floor in their wedding clothes, while downstairs their remaining guests probably wondered where they'd disappeared to. When the timer went off, they looked together at the 2 pink lines that confirmed what Sophia had already known. "I'm pregnant." She whispered it like a confession. "I'm pregnant, and I don't know how I feel about it." Ethan wrapped his arms around her while she cried into his shoulder, the position familiar from a dozen other moments of crisis and revelation. The bathroom floor hard beneath them and utterly unromantic. "What do you want to do?" "I don't know. I've always been so certain I didn't want this. But now..." She pulled back to look at him. "What do you want?" "I want whatever you want. No pressure, no expectations. This is your choice, your body, your life. But it would be our baby. Yours and mine, Liam's sibling. Only if you want it to be." They kept the pregnancy secret for 2 weeks while Sophia wrestled with the decision, talking to her therapist in Cambridge, researching options with the same methodical approach she brought to everything, sitting in the backyard for hours, just thinking while Ethan gave her space, and Liam wondered why Sophia was so quiet lately. The decision came on a Tuesday evening when Liam was demonstrating his latest science project, a working model of the solar system built from recycled materials, his face bright with enthusiasm as he explained orbital mechanics and gravitational pull with the confidence of someone who'd spent hours watching PBS documentaries. Sophia watched him, and Ethan saw the exact moment something shifted in her expression, some internal calculation resolving into certainty. "I want to keep it." She said it later after Liam was asleep, the words quiet but firm. "Are you sure?" "No. I'm terrified going to be terrible at this. Don't know anything about babies except that they're expensive and loud and require not sleeping for years." She took Ethan's hand and placed it on her still flat stomach. "But I want to try. Want to see who we make together. Want to give Liam a sibling who shares DNA with both of us." They told Liam the following weekend, sitting him down with the seriousness the moment deserved, explaining about the baby, about how Sophia was pregnant, about how their family was growing in ways none of them had planned, but all of them could choose. "Does this mean I have to share my room?" That was his first question, practical and immediate. "Not for a while. The baby will be in our room at first." "Can we name it after a constellation?" "Maybe. Depends on the constellation. Andromeda if it's a girl, Orion if it's a boy." Sophia laughed despite the weight of the conversation. "I'm not naming our child Orion." "Why not?" "It's cool. Means hunter. Hunters are cool." They compromised on adding constellation names to a list that would be revised approximately 700 times over the next several months, Liam taking to the idea of being a big brother with enthusiasm that involved reading pregnancy books from the library and offering advice that was approximately 5% accurate and 95% well-meaning nonsense. The pregnancy was hard first trimester, spent violently ill, working from home when possible, and barely making it through meetings when not. Sophia hated every minute of it, the nausea and exhaustion and loss of control over her own body, but she never once regretted the decision to keep the baby, maintaining the distinction between hating the process and wanting the outcome. The second trimester was better energy returning and nausea fading. Sophia actually looking pregnant instead of just exhausted. Liam talked to her stomach about constellations and Mars rovers. Rocket became protective and refused to let Sophia walk anywhere without escort, and Ethan fell more in love with his wife every day, watching her navigate something she'd never wanted, but had chosen anyway. They found out the sex at the 20-week ultrasound, a girl tiny and perfect on the grainy screen. Liam immediately declared she should be named Andromeda, or possibly Cassiopeia, would accept no alternatives. "We're not naming her after a constellation. What about Nova, space-related, but also sounds like a normal name?" Ethan and Sophia exchanged glances, the kind of wordless communication that had developed over months of living together, of learning each other's expressions and tells. "Nova. I actually kind of love that." "Really?" Liam bounced with excitement that nearly knocked over the ultrasound tech's equipment. "I get to help name my sister." "You just did." Nova Brooks entered the world on a freezing December morning, 7 pounds of fury and perfect fingers wailing her displeasure at being evicted from her warm environment. Sophia cried through the entire delivery. Ethan held her hand and forgot to breathe, and Liam waited in the hospital corridor with Mrs. Maggie pacing like an expectant father from a different era. When they finally brought Liam in to meet his sister, he approached the hospital bed with the reverence of someone approaching something sacred and fragile, his usual boundless energy contained into careful stillness. "She's so small. You were this small once." "I don't remember being small. I've always been this size." Sophia laughed, exhausted and radiant despite 20 hours of labor that had left her wrung out and transformed. "Want to hold her?" Liam nodded seriously, and Ethan positioned him carefully on the bed, supporting his arms, as Sophia placed Nova in them. The 10-year-old stared down at his infant sister with an expression that was pure wonder, everything else in the world falling away. "Hi, Nova. I'm Liam, your big brother. I'm going to teach you about stars and planets, and how to throw a baseball, and why Pluto should still be a planet, even though scientists say it's not." Nova yawned, unimpressed by her brother's promises, and Liam was instantly smitten that fast and that complete, the kind of love that happens in moments rather than building over time. They brought Nova home 2 days later to a house that had been transformed by Mrs. Maggie and half the neighborhood into something resembling readiness, a bassinet beside their bed, tiny clothes in drawers that had previously held Sophia's sweaters, bottles, and formula and diapers stacked in quantities that seemed excessive until they started using them. The next months blurred into sleepless nights and endless feedings, Liam helping change diapers with excessive enthusiasm and occasionally getting peed on for his efforts, Rocket adjusting to a tiny human who occasionally grabbed his fur with surprising strength for someone so small. Sophia struggled with postpartum depression that her therapist had warned about, but that no amount of preparation made easier days when getting out of bed felt impossible, when holding Nova felt like holding a stranger's child, when the weight of what she'd chosen threatened to crush her under obligations she wasn't sure she could meet. "I'm a terrible mother," she sobbed it one night while Ethan walked Nova through the house trying to settle her, the baby's cries cutting through walls and reason. "You're not terrible, you're struggling. There's a difference. I don't feel connected to her. I look at her and I love her, but I also feel nothing." "How is that possible?" "Because brain chemistry is adjusting. You're sleep-deprived. Postpartum depression is real and doesn't care about intentions." Ethan sat beside her on the bed, Nova still fussing in his arms. "We're getting you help. Therapist doubled your sessions. Doctor adjusted your medication. You're going to be okay." Slowly, with medication and therapy and the relentless passage of time, Sophia began to feel like herself again. The connection with Nova growing not in the instant, overwhelming way she'd expected, but in quiet moments. A smile during feeding Nova's hand gripping her finger with surprising strength. The weight of her daughter asleep on her chest, creating warmth that seeped deeper than skin. "I think I'm starting to love her." Sophia admitted it when Nova was 3 months old, the confession coming easier in darkness with Ethan beside her. Not just intellectually because she's mine, but actually feel it. Like it's real instead of something I'm supposed to feel. That's normal and allowed and perfectly fine. There's no timeline for this. By Nova's first birthday, they'd settled into something resembling functional chaos. Liam, a devoted big brother who entertained his sister for hours with increasingly elaborate stories about space exploration. Rocket having appointed himself the baby's guardian and sleeping beside her crib, like a furry sentinel. On their 5th wedding anniversary, they hired Mrs. Maggie to watch both kids and returned to the bistro where they'd had their first date. The chocolate torte still illegal in several states. Sophia still ordering too much food so they could share everything. Both of them talking about different things. Now Liam's upcoming middle school transition, Nova's first words, whether they needed a bigger car, now that they were officially a family of 4. "Can you believe we've been married 5 years? Can you believe we've known each other 6? Feels like forever, and also like yesterday. I still remember the gala, you standing there looking like you wanted to escape. I still remember thinking you were terrifying." Sophia laughed, the sound genuine and warm. "I was terrifying. Still am at work, but trying to be less terrifying at home. You're perfect at home. Imperfect, but perfect." They finished dinner and drove home to find Nova asleep in Mrs. Maggie's arms, and Liam showing her his latest school project, a detailed report on Mars colonization that was far too advanced for 6th grade, but absolutely perfect for Liam. After Mrs. Maggie left, and Liam was in bed, and Nova was settled in her crib, Ethan and Sophia stood in the nursery doorway, watching their daughter sleep, her small chest rising and falling with the steady rhythm of someone who didn't yet know the world could be frightening. "Do you ever regret it? Choosing us every day?" Sophia's answer came immediate, and when Ethan started to pull away, she grabbed his hand. "I regret that I was so scared for so long, regret that I almost let fear win. But I don't regret you or Liam or Nova or this messy, complicated, beautiful family we built. Not even on the hard days, especially on the hard days, because the hard days prove it's real, that we're not some fantasy version of a family, but actual people trying our best." They moved to their bedroom, to the king-sized bed that had been too big for one, and was just right for 2, and now frequently got invaded by a 10-year-old with nightmares and a 1-year-old who thought 3 a.m. was an excellent time to socialize. "Is your bed big enough?" Sophia asked, echoing Liam's question from years ago, the one that had started everything. Ethan pulled her close, breathing in the scent of her shampoo mixed with baby powder and the indefinable smell that meant home. This bed's big enough, this life's big enough, this love's big enough. As long as you're the one beside me, always. Through complications and coffee stains and everything in between, they fell asleep tangled together, and sometime around midnight, Liam appeared in their doorway dragging his blanket and mumbling about bad dreams. He climbed into bed between them, and shortly after Nova's cries came through the baby monitor. Ethan retrieved her, and suddenly their king-sized bed held 4 people plus Rocket somehow finding space at the foot, despite physics suggesting otherwise. It was crowded and uncomfortable, and absolutely perfect. Ethan looked at his family, his son who'd survived grief and found hope, his wife who'd conquered fear to choose love, his daughter who represented the future they'd built together, and felt the same thing he'd felt that night at the gala when Sophia had asked him to dance. The possibility that broken people could create something beautiful, that grief didn't have to be the end of the story, that hearts didn't split when they expanded, but just made room for more love. "Dad," Liam whispered in the darkness. "Yeah, buddy. This is nice. All of us together like we're supposed to be." "Yeah, like we're supposed to be." They fell asleep like that. 4 people and a dog in a bed simultaneously, too small and exactly the right size, building a family that looked nothing like what any of them had planned, but everything like what they needed, imperfect and trying, and mostly getting it right. And in the morning, when sunlight streamed through the windows and Nova demanded breakfast, and Liam asked if they could get a bigger bed, Ethan and Sophia would look at each other and laugh and say, "Yes, maybe we'll think about it." Because this was their life now, complicated and beautiful and absolutely theirs. The story that had started with grief and a question about whether hearts could expand had found its answer not in grand gestures or perfect moments, but in the ordinary magic of people choosing each other every single day, in Tuesday dinners and soccer games and backyard proposals, in space camp applications and family trees and beds that were always somehow both too small and big enough in love, that didn't replace, but added, that multiplied instead of dividing, proving again and again that the most beautiful chapters often began after everyone thought the story was already over.